Hi everyone, and welcome back to another City Daily. I think we're getting super close to 100 now, 100 City Dailies, which is very exciting. My name is Emma, I'm from the Cottam site, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a book that I have just finished reading. It's called The Burden is Light by a guy called Jon Tyson, and it has been incredibly challenging. It has called out some things in my life that are important but hard, and so I wanted to put forth the challenge to you also today. I'm only going to talk about one part of the book right now, but I would really recommend reading the whole thing because it's really excellent. But the thing that challenged me most in the book is a chapter on surrender and control. And I think in this season in particular, this is really relevant because we are so tempted to take back control in the midst of uncertainty. And the season that we're all going through is so full of uncertainty that I think the temptation grows stronger and stronger, whether it be with work or with finances or with a whole host of things. We feel the uncertainty, we start finding it harder to trust him, and we start to take back control. I know I've been doing it, and this is why I felt so challenged by the chapter. And so I just want to talk through some of the points that Jon Tyson makes about the negative effects of us trying to control our own lives and the importance of surrendering to God. So, first of all, he talks about how, as a people, we are addicted to control. We love to be in charge and in control of our own lives and what's going on. And he says this: when we become obsessed with managing our existence to the point that we stop trusting God or depending on him, we enter the dangerous territory of seeking to become God ourselves. Our culture is riddled with control mechanisms that facilitate this idolatry. When we seek to control our own lives, we stop trusting God. That is the main point. You can't avoid it, you can't get away from it. If you're controlling your own life or parts of it, you're failing to trust God with that part of your life, and it becomes idolatry. Ben, in his preach a couple of weeks ago, talked about toppling idols, and so often we make ourselves idols in our own lives. We start to play God by trying to take control over parts of our lives, and we make ourselves idols. And this can have a really detrimental effect. The effects of control can be dangerous. And Jon Tyson talks firstly about timing and the effect control has on that. And he says, seeking to act in our own time rather than waiting on God's doesn't accelerate the work of God in our lives. It corrupts it. This is a super challenging thing because so often I think it can be tempting to hear what God says, hear his call in our lives, hear him instructing us to something, and thinking, okay, well, this is happening immediately, so I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. We don't trust that God's timing is perfect, and so we try to take control ourselves. And I know that often for me, my impatience gets in the way of my ability to trust him. But we can't accelerate God's work in our lives. His timing is perfect. And so when we seek to control the timing of what God wants to do, we corrupt his plan for our lives. We get in the way. We fail to trust him. We fail to trust his timing. Another effect of control Jon Tyson talks about is, he says, our temptation to control often results in slavery to the unintended consequences of our fear-driven decisions. Now, this is very real for me. Just a very simplistic example. I am renowned in my family as a panic orderer in restaurants. I'm not very decisive. I never know what I want. The waiter comes to the table, everyone says they're ready. I am never ready. I wait till last to make my order. I panic order. I make a decision. I'm stressed. I just pick something. I always make the wrong decision. And then I have to deal with the effect of sitting and eating an average to below average meal because I panicked and made a decision out of that. This is a pretty simple image of what John Tyson is saying here, but I think so often we make decisions, fear-driven decisions, panic decisions, seeking to control a situation because we are not willing to trust God. We're not willing to wait on what he wants to do and the way he wants things to play out, his plan for our lives. And we are then bound to the results of those decisions we make out of a place of fear and out of a place of wanting to control our own lives. Something else that he talks about in this chapter is the fact that when we try to control our own lives, we then kind of seek to determine what obedience looks like. The whole idea of obedience is that God has our yes every time. But so often when we seek to control our own lives, we try to redefine what obedience means on our own terms. And he says this: control manifests itself when we create the terms and conditions in which we will obey God. Obedience is about trust, and when we try to accomplish God's will in our way, we practice a thinly veiled form of rebellion. I think this is incredibly challenging because so often we can be like, yes, this is what God wants, but I'm going to do it in the way that I feel comfortable with, or I'm going to make this happen and I'm going to do it my way. Again, we make ourselves idols in our own lives. We try to play God. We say, God, I'm going to obey you in these areas of my life, but in these other things, no, I don't think I can trust you, so I'll be controlling those parts. We don't give everything over to him. And this can be really detrimental. It's not trust. It's not obedience if we're determining the terms and conditions, you know? And so John Tyson then goes on to compare control with surrender. He talks about the importance of surrender. And he actually compares surrender and obedience, which is really interesting. And I'm just going to read what he says. It says, Christians often talk about the need for obedience. It's a concept we have come to see as central to our faith. But surrender is superior to obedience. Obedience is a momentary decision, but surrender is the posture of the kingdom. We all know that it's possible to obey God in our behaviour, but rebel against him in our hearts. Obedience can be filled with self-righteousness and ego and can actually reinforce a spirit of control. We can even obey God in an attempt to manipulate him. But surrender is different. Surrender is an open posture of love. Surrender is based not on duty but on trust. It is a free response and attitude that is open to any and all possibilities our Father brings to us. Obedience can happen in a moment, but surrender is the posture of a lifetime. He wants us to surrender to him, and that's what trust looks like. It's not just picking and choosing when we obey, it's fully laying our lives down to be open to what God wants to do, his will, his way, his timing, trusting in all that he is and his plan for our lives. And we see the perfect example of what it looks like to trust the Father through Jesus. And I mean, there's many examples of this, but just a quick one. In Matthew 26:38, just before the crucifixion, Jesus goes to pray and he falls on his face and prays, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And then later on in verse 42, it says, again, for the second time, Jesus went away and prayed, My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. Jesus only did what he saw his Father doing, and he completely trusted the Father, that he had seen the bigger story, that he knew what he was doing, that even though Jesus knew what was about to happen was going to be so hard, he trusted his Father. He lived his life in complete surrender to what the Father wanted, his will, his way. And so we can trust God because God sees the bigger picture. One of the final things that John Tyson says in this chapter is when we give up control, we need to know that someone is aware of the bigger picture, the whole story, and can see everything from start to finish. God has seen the bigger picture. He knows the story because he wrote the story. He is our author and our creator, and so we can trust him. He has placed us into his story at this time, in this place, and so we can trust his plan for our lives. We can trust him with every part of our lives. Jem Wilkin says this: God holds authority over us because he is our author. It is his natural right as our creator. The potter forms the clay, and the clay does not question its design or purpose. We don't need to question God's will and his way and his timing, because he has seen it all. He knows it all. He holds authority over us. He is our author and our creator. And therefore we can trust him because he's seen the bigger picture. He goes before us. He'll never lead us somewhere where he's not been before. And so we can live wholeheartedly surrendered to his will and his way, because it's always better, His will and his way is always better than what we can come up with ourselves. And so I would just encourage you and challenge you to look at your life. It's what I'm doing right now after finishing this book, to look and find the areas of life that you have started to take back control, where you're not living fully surrendered. To lean into trusting God. Something I pray on a regular basis is, God, I trust you. And I give you the parts of me that find it hard to trust. Would you teach me to trust you more? Surrender is about trust and knowing who God is, that he is good and he is faithful, and that we can trust him, not with some parts, but with all parts. And so I would just encourage you this week to lean into that, to trust him, to give him back control, and just live a life of surrender, because that is the posture of the kingdom.